But I want to say welcome and thank you all so much for being here for the first virtual session of this year's Audubon Assembly. We're very excited to share with you this year's slate of conservation priorities for adoption at this evening's annual Conservation Agenda Setting webinar. Most of you already know me. I'm Carol Timmis, Chair of the Audubon Florida Board, and I'm excited to work through the conservation agenda today and approve the statewide and regional conservation priorities. First, I want to thank our sponsors for Audubon Florida's assembly this year, partner sponsors, Publix Supermarkets, the Ferber Company, Florida Power and Light, and Rainier, and program sponsors, the Lake County Tourism Development Council, Likes Brothers, and supporters, Vulcan Materials Company, Holbrook Travel, Adventures Unbound, Riverglades Family Offices, and Kitson and Partners. Little housekeeping before we start. We are in meeting mode today, so please make sure you are on mute, which I was for too long. We are accepting questions through the chat, which you can see at the bottom of your screen. We're offering captions as long to go along, as you can see in the screenshot here, but you can turn them on via the transcript button, also on the bottom of your screen. The entire session will be recorded and available after assembly. All right, let's get started. When Audubon Florida was formed as an alliance of the National Audubon Society, Florida Audubon Society, and Audubon chapters, the new State Board of Directors made a commitment to work on conservation. To achieve this, the board committed to hold an annual Audubon Assembly to set the conservation priorities and to organize regional conservation committees, RCCs, to coordinate chapter conservation work. The regional conservation committees are designed to coordinate the work of Audubon chapters on regional priorities that are in alignment with Audubon Florida's policy priorities. The priorities are habitat, which includes the 4 initiatives: Wings Over Working Lands Initiative, the Water for Birds and People Initiative, the Coastal and Marine Resilience Initiative, and the Urban Conservation Initiative. Climate and Community Building. Each RCC is asked to propose and present a regional conservation priority resolution at the Audubon Assembly that addresses the 2 to 3 common priorities the RCC's chapters will work together on during the coming year. Audubon Florida's Board Policy Committee recommends the statewide conservation priorities. Regional resolutions are independent of these state conservation priorities. The regional and statewide conservation priority resolutions are to be ratified on October 18th at the annual board meeting, and then presented to the Audubon Florida Board of Directors for final approval. These resolutions become the guiding documents for implementing Audubon Florida's Conservation Action Agenda for the next year. This process fulfills the commitment to national. While the process here is brief, be assured that the considerable planning, thought, and collaboration took place in the months leading up to today. The complete priority documents have been posted on the Assembly website and will reside on the Audubon Florida website. I would now like to invite one by one a staff member from each of Audubon Florida policy areas and a representative from each of the chapter regions to share the highlights. Kristen Kosick will then call for a vote to accept after everyone has spoken. You will have the ability to approve each selection individually. Let's start with state priorities. State conservation priority, habitat, includes 4 initiatives. Here's Audrey to get us started.
Hi, everyone. I'm Audrey DeRose-Wilson, Director of Bird Conservation for Audubon Florida, and I'm going to be presenting our Marine and Coastal Resilience Strategy, which falls under the Habitat Strategy in Audubon's Flight Plan. Florida's role in the Atlantic Flyway is most dramatic along its coasts, where the dynamic shorelines and estuaries create essential stopover and wintering habitat. Shorebirds and seabirds congregate on beaches and tidal flats, while raptors trace noon lines during the migration. Neotropical songbirds rely on coastal hammocks and maritime forests as critical resting and refueling sites after or before long overwater flights. Many coastal bird species are now state or federally listed, designated as species of greatest conservation need, or considered indicator species by the National Audubon Society. Protecting and restoring these shifting coastal systems benefits birds and strengthens natural buffers for human communities. Coastal ecosystems also contribute to Florida's economic vitality and quality of life. Yet our coastal habitats are jeopardized by a range of human activities, including beach management and grooming, continued development, coastal armoring and dredging and filling, recreational disturbance, and sea level rise. Because of the extraordinary value and tremendous vulnerability of coastal birds and their habitats, Audubon Florida has long ranked coastal conservation among its highest priorities. The National Audubon Society has also elevated coastal habitats as a strategic priority in Flight Plan and in the conservation blueprints. Therefore, Audubon Florida, in alignment with the National Audubon Society's Flight Plan, resolves to employ sound science to connect a diversity of people to nature using coastal bird life to engage them in the protection of Florida's special coastal places, recruit, train, and deploy a broadly diverse group of volunteers in a variety of stewardship capacities in Gulf Coast and Northeast Florida nesting sites, promote planned shoreline retreat for vulnerable human communities rather than armoring in priority coastal areas in the face of climate change, promote habitat protection strategies that will provide for upland migration of coastal habitats and wildlife ahead of sea level rise, advocate for the value of coastal habitats as protection from the effects of climate change, advocate for the beneficial use of dredge material to create or restore important coastal bird habitats, and advocate for water quality management rules and policies that will reduce nutrient loads in coastal waters to decrease the frequency and duration and intensity of cyanobacteria and red tide outbreaks. And we will advocate to preserve and enforce bedrock bird protection legislation such as the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the Endangered Species Act. And that's all from me.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Caitlin Newcamp, and I'm the Everglades Policy Associate with Audubon Florida. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening and to present the state conservation priority, Habitat, Water for Birds and People. Water connects and defines Florida's ecosystems from springs and rivers to wetlands and seagrass beds, forming the foundation of the state's ecology and economy. These waters sustain diverse wildlife, including iconic species like roseate spoonbills, wood storks, and snail kites. Yet development has disrupted natural water flow, depleted aquifers, and polluted waterways, leading to harmful algal blooms, red tide, and fish kills. Climate change worsens these challenges through sea level rise, stronger storms, and extreme heat, intensifying water scarcity and fire risks. Competing demands from agriculture, industry, and communities further strain natural systems, threatening Florida's environment, economy, and quality of life, especially for underserved communities facing disproportionate pollution and risks to safe drinking water. Therefore, Audubon staff and chapters resolve to take actions described in the proposed state conservation priority for habitat, water for birds, and people in alignment with the National Audubon Society's Flight Plan. I will summarize the major objectives for you. We now resolve to advocate for sustainable water supplies for natural and built systems by supporting water conservation programs, efficiency standards, water use reduction, reduced turf grass, and use of alternative water supplies as conditions in water supply consumptive use permits, and by advocating for all government levels to incorporate extreme weather considerations into planning, prioritizing water conservation, and supporting the use of advanced treated alternative water sources to protect aquifers and reduce reliance on surface water. We further resolve to advocate for water quality improvements by advocating for stronger stormwater and wastewater treatment standards, particularly in impaired basins, including connections to central sewer systems, enhanced nitrogen removing septic systems, and limits on fertilizer use to protect ecological health, and by supporting the use of adequately treated reclaimed water, revising basin management action plans to reduce nutrient impacts, improving enforcement of water laws, and enhancing agricultural and urban stormwater management. We resolve to continue our longstanding work to protect and restore America's Everglades by securing increased and consistent funding at the state and federal levels to advance the comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan and other key restoration programs to increase freshwater storage, maximize freshwater flows, and achieve maximum ecosystem benefits as quickly as possible, and by continuing to advocate for increased cooperative water storage solutions north of Lake Okeechobee to provide additional capacity, reduce excessive water flows, and enable water quality treatment, and by promoting robust monitoring and restoration projects and protecting indicator species like roseate spoonbills and wood storks. Finally, we resolve to advocate for equitable water policies that ensure all people have access to clean, safe, and affordable water supplies by researching and assessing where new policy can support environmental justice and by engaging with diverse communities to ensure equitable access to clean, safe, and affordable water supplies, and by advocating for local, state, and federal environmental programs and agency decisions are administered without discrimination, ensuring no community is disproportionately affected by water quality and quantity impacts. That concludes the presentation of Habitat, Water for Birds and People priority, and I'll turn it back over to the moderator to introduce the next priority. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm going to summarize this. I presume you can all hear me. Florida is home to an extraordinary natural legacy. We have 69 distinct ecosystems that sustain thousands of species, many found nowhere else. Native birds help keep these species healthy, and Audubon and its partners have identified important bird areas necessary to their survival. Yet, development, intensive agriculture, and human activity continue to shrink and fragment habitats. About 1/3 of Florida's 35 million acres is protected public land. Many areas under restoration, but millions of additional acres of critical habitat lie on private ranches and forests, lands that produce food and timber, protect water, and support natural communities. Audubon Florida's partnership with ranchers goes back more than 60 years, beginning with the voluntary bald eagle sanctuaries in the Kissimmee Valley. Those collaborations remain vital today as both public and private lands face growing pressure from urban expansion and new infrastructure. Protecting these lands and the people who steward them is key to sustaining Florida's birds, wildlife, and natural heritage. Therefore, be it resolved, with Audubon Florida guided by science and strengthened by the dedication of its members, chapters, and partners, we will support state laws and local programs that protect and manage conservation lands, strengthen partnerships with private landowners, and promote incentives that keep ranches and working forests intact. Advocate for sustained funding of Florida Forever and the Rural and Family Lands Protection Programs to expand conservation easements and land protection. Champion the Florida Wildlife Corridor as a unifying vision to connect and conserve wild Florida. Defend our conservation lands from sale, misuse, or conversion to development. Work with transportation agencies to avoid or offset damage to natural lands from new highways and other linear projects. Expand citizen science programs such as our J-Watch and Eagle Watch programs to engage volunteers and strengthen long-term monitoring. Mobilize local chapters and communities to advocate for stewardship, restoration, and conservation where they live. Florida's lands and waters define who we are. By standing together, citizens, landowners, and public officials, we can assure that Florida's birds and wildlife places will endure vibrant and whole for generations to come. Thank you very much.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Kristen Kosick, the chapter's conservation manager for Audubon, Florida, and I will be presenting our urban conservation priorities under the habitat milestone. Florida is home to an incredible diversity of habitats, plants, birds, and wildlife. These natural systems aren't just beautiful, they support our economy, communities, and our quality of life. But human activity, especially climate change and rapid urban growth, is putting increasing pressure on them. Florida's role in the Atlantic Flyway extends into our cities and suburbs. More than 500 native bird species rely on urban parks, street trees, and green spaces for food, water, and shelter. When we strengthen urban habitats, people benefit too. Neighborhoods stay cooler, air and water quality improve, and communities feel more connected to nature. As Florida continues to grow, urban development fragments natural areas, replacing them with roads, buildings, and sterile landscapes. Hazards like reflective glass and bright nighttime lighting pose additional threats to birds. Many of these impacts can be reduced through thoughtful community choices. Native plants form the foundation of the food chain, while artificial nesting sites, boxes, platforms, and burrows help replace lost habitat. Programs like Plants for Birds, Lights Out, and window strike prevention empower communities to make a measurable difference. Audubon plays a vital role through education, outreach, and advocacy. Their programs connect people of all ages with birds and nature, inspire conservation action, and build a stronger, more inclusive community. When birds thrive, people thrive too. Therefore, be it resolved, Audubon Florida, in alignment with the National Audubon Society's flight plan, will call on the volunteer leadership of Audubon chapters, members, grassroots networks, and will work with conservation allies, businesses, and community leaders, public officials, and agencies to promote and support the Plants for Birds program by encouraging Florida chapters to partner with mission-aligned organizations on plant sales, speakers, and projects that mobilize communities to promote the use of native plants in all landscapes. By promoting the use of Audubon Florida and Florida Power and Light Plants for Birds grants and National Audubon Society grants to maximize the visibility and value of Florida plants in the landscape. By promoting the use of native plants to both public and private entities such as developers, utilities, homeowners associations, and other large land users, and evaluating elements of solar sites for inclusion in the Florida Power and Light Solar Stewardship Program. Also, to minimize building strikes and lighting distractions through bird-friendly buildings by sharing information on the National Audubon Society's Lights Out program and other opportunities to reduce disorientation and window strikes, especially during migration season. And by promoting peer-to-peer learning, connecting chapters as they implement new initiatives within their communities. Also, to provide good homes for birds by coordinating with the Eagle Watch program through the Audubon Center for Birds of Prey and other partners to replace osprey platforms and track damage to eagle nests destroyed during weather events. And by encouraging grassroots-supported installation and monitoring of eastern bluebird trails, American kestrel nest boxes, nesting platforms, burrowing owl starter burrows, and arrays for purple martin colonies. And lastly, to increase and engage Audubon membership through outreach, education, conservation, and advocacy by promoting Audubon Adventures Plants for Birds edition in both English and Spanish for use in the classroom and after-school programs, by providing speakers and sharing presentation on relevant topics, and by assisting our grassroots network with the implementation of bird-friendly communities projects that will strategically engage new and diverse audiences while building chapter capacity for conservation. Thank you. This concludes the Urban Conservation Priorities section.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Beth Alvey. I'm the Senior Director of Policy, and I'm pleased to present Audubon Florida's climate priorities for our 2026 State Conservation Action Agenda. Florida stands at the front line of climate change. Rising seas, stronger storms, and more frequent wildfires are already shaping our landscape and our communities. These changes threaten not only our birds and wildlife, but also our homes, economies, and our way of life. Outdated infrastructure, the loss of natural flood prevention systems, and continued reliance on carbon-emitting energy sources are amplifying these impacts. To protect both people and wildlife, we must reduce risk, strengthen resilience, and transition swiftly to clean, renewable energy. Audubon Florida is committed to tackling these challenges, advancing climate solutions that are scientifically sound, nature-based, and equitable. Therefore, be it resolved, Audubon Florida will take the following actions to address the causes and impacts of climate change. Advocate for responsible siting and improved planning of solar and other clean energy projects to ensure renewable energy is deployed swiftly and sustainably. Support innovation in clean energy technology, including battery storage and grid improvements to enhance the reliability and efficiency of renewable power. Promote projects that mimic natural systems, combining green and hybrid infrastructure to reduce flood risk and to restore natural water flow. Prioritize protection and restoration of ecosystems that defend us from storms and store carbon, including mangroves, seagrasses, coral reefs, salt marshes, and healthy wetlands. Oppose harmful adaptation measures such as seawalls and beach armoring that destroy habitat and provide only short-term protection. Advance carbon sequestration projects, including sustainable forestry and ranching practices that lock carbon in soils and in vegetation. Foster collaboration among state, regional, and local partners, government agencies, nonprofits, and businesses to coordinate climate resilience strategies that are cost-effective and landscape scale. Educate the public and policymakers about how climate change affects people, birds, wildlife, and water resources. Partner with underserved communities to ensure resilience planning, funding, and outcomes are fair, inclusive, and equitable. Together, these priorities reflect Audubon Florida's commitment to protecting our people, wildlife, and natural resources in a changing climate. By combining innovation, sound science, and collaboration, we can make Florida a more resilient for today's communities and for generations that follows. This completes my presentation of Audubon's climate priorities for 2026. I'd like to pass the baton over to Renee Wilson, who will talk to you about community building.
Okay, my name is Renee Wilson. I'm Senior Communications Coordinator, and I'll be presenting the State Conservation Priority for Community Building. Creating lasting change requires broad public engagement and collective action. To safeguard birds and the natural world they depend on, we must expand our community of advocates, building a movement of people who care and act for birds, both on the ground and through leadership, to generate real conservation impact. Florida's rich diversity in both wildlife and our communities can make the state more resilient in the face of a changing climate, development pressures, and other challenges. By fostering a shared appreciation for birds, that collective first step is taken toward inspiring action to protect them and the places they need. An active and engaged community of Floridians who care about birds will drive progress across a range of flight plan priorities and programs. Bird enthusiasts help advance our community science efforts and provide critical data to inform sound policy and land management decisions. Audubon's work grows stronger when more people join in. By inviting a wide spectrum of perspectives and experiences, we deepen our understanding, broaden our reach, and create lasting conservation successes that benefit birds and all who share their world. Therefore, be it resolved, Audubon Florida will call upon the volunteer leadership of Audubon chapters, members, and grassroots network, and will work with conservation allies, businesses, and community leaders, public officials, and agencies to inspire the next generation of conservation leaders, Audubon members, and staff by providing mentorship, experiential learning, and networking opportunities to Florida college students through our Conservation Leadership Initiative, supporting the creation and ongoing work of Audubon campus chapters in Florida, providing in-depth learning, professional skill building, and volunteer opportunities through internships and other programs. We will leverage Audubon's grassroots network to broaden our reach and amplify our flight plan priorities by addressing region-wide conservation issues in partnership with Audubon chapters across Florida through the 7 regional conservation committees and supporting their collaboration, growth, and long-term sustainability. By engaging with volunteers through community science programs, expanding our statewide impact by engaging individuals directly in meaningful projects. We also will inspire engagement and action at the Center for Birds of Prey and Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary by facilitating education programming, hosting public events, participating in community events, and recruiting volunteers to assist with center operations and outreach activities, fostering a sense of community and collaboration, and empowering them to become advocates who champion Audubon's mission. We'll also produce and disseminate engaging and timely conservation communications through a variety of media and accessible options by being a source of dependable, science-based, practical information for a range of audiences, by developing materials readable by people with different sight and reading levels across reports, social media posts, web posts, and more, and by using a variety of media to convey content, including both in print and digital content where appropriate, and partnering with traditional and social media outlets as well as other organizations to share content and promote Audubon's missions and goals. We also will welcome new communities into the Audubon Florida network by seeking opportunities to partner with underrepresented communities and community-based organizations, improving accessibility options for centers, field trips, events, and online programming. In addition, offering comprehensive information ahead of time so individuals can prepare and make informed decisions, and by producing multimedia communications materials that are both accessible to vision impaired communities and available in multiple languages to reach broader audiences. And that concludes the community building section of the Audubon Action Agenda.
I'll just take it from here. Thank you all so very much. And I'd just like to call on the presenters representing the RCC. And if we could start with Mary Keith.
I'm Mary Keith, representing the Gulf Coast region. Gulf Coast region stretches from northern Charlotte County through Citrus County and includes 11 Audubon chapters. Florida's Gulf Coast includes a rich assemblage of habitats to support a great diversity of flora and fauna. Many essential wildlife habitats have been and are still being degraded, altered, and fragmented by development and exploitation. Rural landscapes are experiencing increased urbanization due to burgeoning human population. Urban suburban development with poor and uninformed landscape maintenance practices, including poor timing such as the removal of vegetation during nesting season, will cause destruction and damage to habitats and wildlife. The effects of climate change, sea level rise, harmful algal blooms, and fluctuating precipitation patterns threaten offshore, coastal, and inland ecosystems and the birds that depend on them throughout the region. Significant intervention and management efforts are required to further prevent population declines or local extirpations. Seasonal freshwater flows from springs, streams, and rivers and adjacent uplands and wetlands are vital to the area's diverse and productive estuaries. Estuarine ecosystems throughout Florida's Gulf Coast region suffer from degradations or alterations of upstream habitats due to pollution, flood control, strip mining, development, and consumptive water projects. Chapters take active roles in local and regional habitat protection to improve functionality of natural systems and to continue to raise the Audubon profile as a stakeholder. This is done by working collaboratively with other conservation and wildlife organizations throughout the state, using chapter field trips, Christmas bird counts, great backyard bird counts, hookbird campaigns. These are complemented by shorebird stewardship, bird population surveys, and community science programs to recruit volunteers and build data sets using programs such as eBird for relationship building tools and the Foundation for Advocacy, Conservation, and Education. Therefore, be it resolved, the Audubon chapters of the Gulf Coast region of Florida, in alignment with Audubon Florida and National Audubon's Flight Plan, and using information derived from sound science, will work together to increase Audubon's influence on conservation decisions in this region using the following strategies. With habitat, water for birds and people, underscoring the benefits of natural areas, wetlands, living shorelines, and native plant landscaping as natural and nature-based climate and water solutions, working with various local and state agencies, and educating the public on maintaining private and conservation lands properly, and advocating for scientifically appropriate habitat conservation, preservation, and restoration. Continuing to address local water quality issues through protection of natural water resources, improvement of stormwater treatment, reduction of pollution, and prioritization of water for lakes, rivers, springs, and estuaries, and by building on current and previous funding opportunities. In the Habitat for Coastal and Marine Resilience, speaking at local and regional public meetings regarding issues facing coastal and other environmentally sensitive areas, seeking opportunities to serve on advisory boards, participate in land management reviews, and build relationships with local and state agency staff. Support developing climate resilient solutions, such as restoring natural coastlines to respond to the effects of sea level rise and changing climate patterns such as droughts and floods, as well as educating the public on the benefits of natural areas, wetlands, living shorelines, and native plant landscaping as nature-based climate solutions. Under urban conservation initiatives, to promote programs such as Plants for Birds, Lights Out, Green Building, bird-friendly buildings, and other best practices. To monitor and protect urban and exurban rural areas for migrating birds, and advocate against development encroachment on important bird and wildlife habitats. Educating homeowners, the public, property managers, and landscaping companies about the impact of cutting down trees during nesting season, timely use of fertilizers, safe choices of pesticides, rodenticides, and herbicides, and the use of native plants and water features in landscapes. And under community building, recruit mentors to participate in the Audubon Florida Conservation Leadership Initiative, and support young birders clubs and other school-age environmental groups and activities in our communities. Develop local connections to reach a wide range of members in the community, including all ages, abilities, and socioeconomic status, and involve them in conservation issues and initiatives. And to build and educate advocates to speak at public meetings, regularly communicate with decision makers at all levels of relevant government activities, liaise with local media and communications, and speak to community organizations. This concludes my presentation.
Brad? Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Brad Cornell, and a board member of Audubon of Southwest Florida and Audubon Florida staff for this RCC. Bren Curtis is our chair and board representative. The Southwest Florida RCC includes 5 chapters: Henry Glades Audubon, Peace River Audubon, Sanibel Captiva, Audubon of Southwest Florida, and Audubon Western Everglades. Our chapters work in the vast Western Everglades landscapes that include the Big Cypress and Corkscrew Swamps, where Audubon's iconic sanctuary is, Everglades National Park, Charlotte Harbor and tributary Peace River, Lake Okeechobee and the Caloosahatchee River and estuary, and the fascinating coastal barrier islands from the 10,000 Islands and Rookery Bay to Sanibel Captiva, Cayo Costa, and Gasparilla Island. These resources face some of the highest urbanization and land conversion rates in the state, as well as some of the biggest restoration ambitions. Our 5 chapters resolve to work in alignment with Audubon's flight plan and the Audubon Florida conservation priorities we've just heard previously, and within the land's habitat objective in flight plan to support conservation land acquisition, restoration, and management, including wildlife crossings, good land use planning, and good regulatory programs. Benefits targeted for scrub jays and wood storks especially. Within the coastal and marine resilience habitat objective, to implement coastal bird stewardship programs, including nesting and non-nesting stewardship, staffed by Audubon biologists and trained volunteers. And within the Urban Conservation Initiative habitat objective, to work to reduce bird strike deaths, targeting building glass and design, and communication tower placement and design. Actions also include collaboration with allies such as the Florida Collision Mitigation Team and the Bird Collision Prevention Alliance, and to protect and recover Florida's burrowing owl populations, many of which are in urban areas, through monitoring, research, public education, and rodenticide elimination campaigns, and to cultivate urban habitat for birds through conversion of grass to native plants and other urban habitats shared with wildlife. These efforts include Audubon Plants for Birds, water conservation efforts, dark skies, urban lighting programs and criteria, and Doug Tommy's homegrown national park movement. And finally, within the Audubon Consensus Flight Plan objective for community building, equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging work will continue to be part of all bird conservation and habitat restoration and protection through targeted engagement of children, families, schools, groups, and neighborhoods that suffer most from habitat loss, climate destabilization, and declining biodiversity, and are underrepresented in conservation efforts. This engagement will be pursued for all our regional conservation initiatives, as well as by individual chapters on their projects. And with that, that's the conclusion of our conservation priorities resolution.
Hello, I'm Doug Young. I represent South Florida Audubon Society, which is one of the 4 chapters that makes up the Everglades RCC. So we are the lower southeastern coast of Florida, known for its beautiful beaches, productive estuaries, unique wildlife, and proximity to the greater Everglades. We also are one of the nation's densest and fastest growing urban areas. The combination creates a distinct set of conservation challenges when trying to accommodate human needs while protecting and restoring a uniquely tropical biodiversity hotspot within North America. This includes, but is not limited to, the greater Everglades, coastal ecosystems such as Lake Worth Lagoon, Biscayne Bay, Florida Bay, the coral reef system, and other wildlife habitats in Southeast Florida. The following goals reflect a shared commitment across the 4 chapters encompassed within the Everglades Regional Conservation Committee. Together, the RCC will work towards these goals. Habitat, water for birds and people. We highlight Everglades restoration in our education outreach programs, campaigns, and tours to educate the public, private sector, and government entities on the benefits of Everglades restoration, particularly in relation to conservation of water quality, to expedite and improve implementation throughout the entire greater Everglades ecosystem. We participate in the Everglades Coalition to support advocacy efforts to fund, restore, and protect the greater Everglades ecosystem. We monitor projects to safeguard Everglades restoration, oppose those that may impede restoration progress or set a dangerous precedent on conservation lands, and advocate for smart growth practices. Habitat Urban Conservation Initiative. We facilitated and encourage involvement in bird monitoring programs, including shorebirds, hawk watches, Christmas bird counts, bird banding, and community science, such as through eBird and Merlin, as well as supporting formal research to enhance the understanding of birds in Southeast Florida ecosystems and to support implementation of regional conservation projects. We protect critical remaining natural habitat and buffers by advocating against detrimental development through education, civic engagement, and political campaigns. We restore and create wildlife habitat within Southeast Florida's dense urban corridor by promoting the Plants for Birds and Living Shoreline programs, eradicating non-native invasive species, supporting the creation and maintenance of habitat, including rookeries, spoil islands, rooftop nesting sites, etc., and educating the public about the importance of such habitats and their pollinators. We advocate for target species and their habitats when threatened by development, pollution, air, water, light, and other urban threats through the development of regional campaigns like the Lights Out and Bird Safe Building programs. Climate, clean energy, and natural climate solutions. We educate chapter members, community members, and decision makers on current and future impacts of climate change on built and natural environments, such as fresh water supplies, sea level rise, storm frequency and intensity, habitat degradation, and shifts in bird and other wildlife behavioral and distributional patterns. We incorporate climate change initiatives in current and future programs. We also advocate for mitigation and adaptation policies that promote regional resiliency to climate change, particularly in adopting new technologies and methodologies such as renewable energy sources, energy efficiency measures, and the use of nature-based solutions. Finally, community building. We continue and enhance opportunities for diverse audiences to engage with chapters by connecting and partnering with all communities, particularly the underserved, through existing frameworks, utilizing inclusive language and outreach and promotional material, and offering programs accessible to people with potential barriers to participation, such as language, mobility, financial, cultural, gender, etc. We expand ongoing efforts to offer bilingual and translated programming and mobility accessible field trips. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Nelson, and I'm the president of Audubon in Martin County and the regional chapter director for the Indian River Lagoon, which we have 6 chapters that border, of course, the Indian River Lagoon here on the eastern coast of Florida. The Indian River Lagoon is a singular treasure. Its health begins in the land surrounding it. Overdrainage and nutrient pollution start in our watersheds and end up in our waters and harm biodiversity and our quality of life. Recent widespread losses of seagrass, algae blooms, and starving manatees are simply not acceptable. The Indian River Lagoon Regional Conservation Committee's 2026 conservation priorities build on previous efforts to include funding for conservation initiatives throughout the region, seek long-term solutions for protecting water quality, and to continue public education on the values of native landscaping and increase equity and inclusion of all people within Audubon. The chapters will advocate, educate, and perform outreach among all sectors of our community. Therefore, be it resolved, the Audubon chapters in the Indian River Lagoon region, in alignment with Audubon Florida and the Flight Plan Atlantic Flyway, using information derived from sound science and motivated by community compassion, will mobilize volunteer leadership, members, conservation allies, community leaders, public officials, and government agencies to first, under Habitat, Wings Over Working Lands, to support local, regional, and state initiatives to increase funding for land conservation initiatives by working with local governments to explore local bond initiatives for land acquisition and conservation, regional state legislatures to restore and sustain funding for Florida Forever and associated programs at the $300 million per year level, water management districts to sustain millage rates and direct funding towards land and water conservation projects on public and private lands. For water, for birds and people, we advocate for the state and or local governments to phase out land application of all biosolids, diverting them towards energy and other practical purposes within the next 5 years. To strengthen and enforce fertilizer ordinances, requiring summer bans on fertilizing and increased enforcement. To improve urban and agricultural best management practices, including riparian buffers, littoral zones, and living shorelines. To support septic to sewer conversions by 2030 throughout the region and to require regular inspections, and to support the LOSM goal of significantly reducing Lake Okeechobee's discharges to the St. Lucie River. Under urban and conservation initiatives, we propose to work with local governments to develop ordinances to stop the sale of all invasive plants and wildlife in the SISMA list and to support control measures where appropriate. To reduce turf grass limits to 20% of new developments and redevelopments with an emphasis on encouraging native plant use. To develop a model ordinance that emphasizes using native plants, reduces exotic species, protects trees, and outlines other beneficial practices. We want to educate decision makers, homeowner associations, garden clubs, commercial entities, and other groups of citizens on the benefit of native landscaping and how to implement best management practices. We would also like to encourage community members to plant natives by providing resources such as including links for native plant benefits on their websites and social media, and distributing native plants and seeds to the public. And finally, to support and encourage more nurseries to carry and promote the use of native plants. Under community building, we're promoting the actively solicit involvement from underrepresented and underserved communities in programs, field trips, and other activities. It's important to emphasize that we cannot merely invite diverse groups, to join us, but that we must also join them in their community activities on a two-way street for fostering closer relationships. Audubon centers, libraries, public outdoor spaces, and field trips are perfect avenues to welcome new people into our Audubon community and provide educational opportunities to low-income and Title I students. We would also like to use education and outreach to resolve the disconnect between human life and nature in community members, particularly among youth, students, and migrants to Florida who are unfamiliar with Florida's ecosystems and the importance of their health for human health and prosperity. And finally, under coastal and marine resilience, we are advocating to work with state agencies such as the FDEP and the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission to advocate for the protection of important seabird and shorebird nesting and wintering habitat through spoil island protection and enhancement, such as adding more spoil, maintenance, and suitable nesting habitat, and removal of vegetation as needed. And in a special consideration for the Treasure Coast, to work to minimize harmful effects for the proposed SpaceX expansion. These are our conservation priorities for 2026. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I am Marcia Cox, and I'm representing the conservation priorities of the Central Florida RCC. As a group and with a shared focus, we resolved that the Audubon chapters in the Central Florida region In alignment with Audubon Florida and the flight plan, using information derived from sound science and motivated by community compassion, will mobilize volunteer leadership, members, conservation allies, community leaders, public officials, and government agencies to, in the area of habitat, wings over working lands. We will advocate for full funding for Florida Forever and the Rural and Family Lands Protection Program to secure money to preserve through purchase or conservation easements identified conservation properties such as the Lenhold Farm, a vital property that links Ocala National Forest with the Wekiva River, Conlin Lake, Kirchman Tract, an 11,000-acre pristine property at the headwaters of the Oconomowoc and Kissimmee Rivers, conservation easements on Kissimmee Valley ranch lands where owners are interested and willing to participate, and the Green Swamp, considered Florida's hydrological heart with its related uplands, a critical part of the central portion of Florida's wildlife corridor, running through Polk, Lake, Sumter, Hernando, and Pasco counties. We will meet with legislators and other decision makers to build support for specific properties rather than lobbying solely for the umbrella programs. We will remain vigilant and take appropriate action to defend conservation lands from incompatible uses, such as hotels, golf courses, and high-intensity user-based recreation. We recognize that land use plans must ensure the integrity of both the Florida aquifer and the Florida wildlife corridor. So we will work to protect local government land use plans from changes that allow development projects in the wrong places or propagate new highways that will harm important habitat. And in the area of climate, clean energy, we will work to educate local municipalities, zoning boards, city and county governments with accurate, science-based data when permits to site solar farms are being planned and when they come on the agenda. We will advocate for placement of solar facilities in the proper location and explain to community groups and educate them on the benefits of solar farms in their neighborhood. We will educate the public and the decision makers on the need to expand the use of renewable energy sources, such as solar, to reduce the harmful impacts of reliance on fossil fuels. And in the area of community building, we will continue to look for opportunities to build community relationships in underserved communities, which are often adversely affected by land management decisions. And we will ask them how Audubon may be of assistance to their cause. That concludes the sharing of our priorities. Thank you very much for your attention.
Good evening. I'm Jim Brady. I live in Pensacola, the western gate to the Sunshine State, where thousands live to where millions wish they could. The Audubon chapters in the Northwest Florida region, there are 4 of us extending from the Alabama state border all the way over to east of Tallahassee. Our chapters, in alignment with Audubon Florida and the Atlantic Flyway, agree to work in the following areas. Under urban conservation initiatives, we intend to create bird-friendly communities by advocating for native pollinators and for plants for birds. We intend to protect birds from collisions with buildings by participating in the Lights Out program and window strike prevention. We will provide nest boxes for birds. I just put up 14 eastern bluebird boxes this month, as well as purple martins, and we encourage the public to participate. Under Wings Over Working Lands, we will protect and sustain the region's biodiversity by supporting the Department of Defense-sponsored Northwest Florida Sentinel Lands Program, which is creating a wildlife corridor across the Panhandle. We will continue to support the acquisition and management of conservation lands with particular emphasis on Florida Forever projects. This includes the identification of new lands and providing comments on the ranking and funding of acquisitions. Under coastal marine resilience, we will partner with established and evolving panhandle estuary programs and support other programs of interest to the Audubon Florida Conservation Mission, which includes monitoring and advocating for the protection of shorebirds and beach nesting birds in our area. Under community building, we will build the case for strategic land conservation and sustainability in the Panhandle, leveraging community advocacy with tools such as science-based written and public comments, eBird, field trips, programs, and so on. We will mutually support chapters across the Panhandle on conservation activities and projects that engage the collective power of an inclusive community invested in environmental equity and justice. And finally, we will initiate integrated planning across the chapters to develop viable support plans for maintenance of chapter conservation activities, which includes protecting important historical documents in the face of natural disasters such as hurricanes. This concludes my presentation.
Good evening. I'm Amy Cook. I'm the chair of the Northeast Regional Conservation Committee. Our committee covers 16 counties and is served by 7 chapters. We run on the coast from Nassau down to Flagler County and inland from Marion to Hamilton counties. Our region harbors unique water resources, a variety of ecosystems and climate strongholds that support resident wildlife and the birds of the Atlantic Flyway. In fact, the beaches and dunes of the region's coastal strand are the last significant nesting sites for shorebirds and seabirds on the east coast of Florida. And our extensive coastal marshes are essential nurseries for fish and invertebrates, while our coastal scrub and maritime hammocks are home not only to our resident birds, but provide essential breeding and foraging areas for migrating birds. Adequate monitoring and habitat management measures are critical in all of these areas as pressures from human activity in Northeast Florida continue to increase. Therefore, the 7 chapters have resolved with respect to habitat conservation. We are going to continue to create native bird-friendly communities through the development of chapter-sponsored plant gardens, educational seminars, and other events, and the distribution of native plants to local communities. We are also going to continue to participate and capacity build in Eagle Watch, Jay Watch, Kestrel box monitoring, Purple Martin conservation projects, Lights Out Northeast Florida, local shorebird partnerships, environmentally beneficial wasteland, wetland treatment facilities, the Ocklawaha River restoration, climate change resiliency, and solar production. With respect to community building, we have resolved to continue to develop partnerships with local, state, and federal agencies, decision makers, nonprofit entities, and for-profit companies, homeowner associations, and water management districts to promote birds and bird habitat. We also have resolved to continue to work with educational institutions, homeschool groups, public libraries, and underserved communities to spread conservation messages and foster an appreciation for the natural world. That concludes my presentation.
All right. Thank you, Amy. So after all of our presentations tonight, the last thing to do is for everyone to cast a vote to approve the priorities that you heard tonight. So I'm launching it now. You should see a poll up on your screen. There are 13 questions. All are yes or no. And yep, we've got yeses across the board. All right, Carol, you want to close this out?
I'd be happy to. Thank you all for coming tonight and for voting so positively in a very supportive way, and look forward to seeing you all next week at the Assembly.